Habakkuk Chapter 3. A prayer of Habakkuk, the prophet upon Shigionoth. Shigionoth, from shaga, to wander, to reel, to stagger, the same root used for one who reels through drink or errs unknowingly. The word marks a wandering, impassioned musical form, an ode composed under strong emotional motion rather than fixed meter. The chapter that follows a fixed watch, mishmarty, and a fixed tower, matsur, in chapter 2, opens with a title word for wandering, shaga, the disciplined stillness of the watch giving way to the reeling motion of the song. Habakkuk 3:2. O Lord, I have heard thy speech and was afraid. O Lord, revive thy work in the midst of the years. In the midst of the years, make known in wrath, remember mercy. Heard, Shama, the identical root carried through the verse, the Shema, the hearkening that in Joshua reversed direction. Afraid, yare, fear as reverence, distinct from pashad, terror. Revive, chaya, to live, the same root inside of chava, Eve, and inside chaya, the third letter stage of the yod's descent into mem. Midst of the years, karev shanim. Karev, meaning the inward part, the interior, the same root as korban, an offering brought near. The prophet asks for life, chaya, to be placed inward, karev, within the very years that carry the burden. Habakkuk 3:3. God came from Teman, and the Holy One from Mount Paran. Selah, his glory, covered the heavens, and the earth was full of his praise. Teman, from Yamin, the right hand, the south, the same root behind Benjamin, son of the right hand, the same hand already extended as the anode steering stator, reaching towards the celestial yod. Paran connected to Peir, to be beautiful, or to a root meaning cave or ravine. Covered, kisah, to cover completely, the same root as Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Kafar, the goat sent to the wilderness. The glory that covers the heavens is named with the identical root as the covering performed on the Day of Atonement. The macro covering and the ritual covering share the same one word. Habakkuk 3:4. And his brightness was as the light. He had horns coming out of his hand, and there was the hiding of his power. Horns, qarnayim, dual form, two horns, rays or projections, the same word used for the horns of an altar and for the rays of light on Moses' face descending from Sinai. Paran in Exodus 34:29. Hiding, chevyon, a concealment, from the same root as chaba, to hide. Power, oz, strength, might. Two projecting horns from a single hand and a hidden strength within them is the same image already carried as the vesica piscis. Two overlaying fields, concealing their combined power at the center where they cross. Habakkuk 3:5. Before him went the pestilence, and burning coals went forth at his feet. pestilence, dver, plague, from a root connected to dvar, word, thing, matter, the same consonantal root as speech itself, a destroying word going before the Lord. Burning coals, resheph, from the same root as flame or spark, also the name of a Canaanite deity of plague and fire. The word that destroys, dver, shares its root with the word that speaks, dvar, the identical structure already seen in masa, burden, which is also revelation. Habakkuk 3:6. He stood and measured the earth. He beheld and drove asunder the nations, and the everlasting mountains were scattered. The perpetual hills did bow. His ways are everlasting. Stood, amad, the identical root as the moons, stayed. Amad, in Joshua 10:13, the mediating stance rather than cessation. Measured, mud, to measure out, to survey a boundary. Everlasting, ad, and perpetual, olam, two distinct Hebrew words for permanence. Ad, marking a fixed terminal point, olam, marking a hidden, unbounded duration. The mountains, named ad, fixed point everlasting, are scattered, while the hills, named olam, hidden duration everlasting, merely bow. A distinction the single word everlasting perpetual conceals, but the Hebrew holds separately. The fixed point structure breaking, where the hidden duration structure only yields. Ad and olam are the same distinction already carried by the wandering gear that keeps turning for whatever remains calibrated to it. Olam, hidden duration, bowing without breaking, against the vessel phase-locked permanently, ad, fixed point, scattered and reset rather than merely yielding. Habakkuk 3:7. I saw the tents of Cushan in affliction, and the curtains of the land of Midian did tremble. Tremble, ragaz, to quake, to be agitated, the same root behind rogez, turmoil. Habakkuk 3:8. Was the Lord displeased against the rivers? Was thine anger against the rivers? Was thy wrath against the sea, that thou didst ride upon thine horses and thy chariots of salvation? Rivers, Neharim, and sea, Yam, two distinct bodies of water addressed separately. Salvation, Yeshua, the identical root already carried through Yehoshua and Yeshua, source saves. The chariots are named in their own Hebrew word, with the same root as the name Joshua himself carries. Chariots of Yeshua, salvation chariots. The vehicle and the deliverer sharing one root. A chariot and a wheel are the same image. Ezekiel's own wheel in the middle of a wheel, already naming the dual hemisphere torus in motion. The chariot here carrying that identical architecture into Habakkuk. The horses themselves complete a reversal already opened in chapter 1. Swifter than the leopards, ungoverned kinetic velocity without a unifying frequency. Now ridden as chariots of salvation, the same animal under Source's own hand rather than running loose ahead of it. The identical reversal Revelation 19:11-16 names directly the white horse. The field locked into readiness, faithful and true in the saddle. rather than the beast running free. Habakkuk 3:9. Thy bow was made quite naked, according to the oaths of the tribes, even thy word, Selah. Thou didst cleave the earth with rivers. Naked, area, bared, stripped, from the same consonantal family as orla, foreskin, carried in chapter 2, verse 16, or light, an uncovering of what a boundary layer had held concealed. Cleave, baka, to split open, the same root used for the splitting of the Red Sea and the splitting of the rock in the wilderness. The same vertical action that the ark's own 1-cubit window performs, the z-axis breaking the horizontal plane rather than moving along it. Habakkuk 3:10. The mountains saw thee, and they trembled. The overflowing of the water passed by. The deep uttered his voice and lifted up his hands on high. Deep, Tehom, the identical word from Genesis 1:2. The face of the Tehom the Spirit moved upon. The Neptunian dielectric reservoir uttered his voice, Natan Kolo, gave forth its kol, the identical word carried from Joshua 10:14, the voice of a man source hearkened to. Here, the Tehom itself is granted a kol, the same acoustic office loaned to the human voice in Joshua, now loaned to the deep waters themselves. Matthew 3:16 through 17. And Jesus, when he was baptized, went up straightway out of the water, and lo, the heavens were opened unto him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove, and lighting upon him. And lo, a voice from heaven saying, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Dove, Greek, peristera, voice, phone, the Greek register of kol, the same acoustic office Joshua 10:14 and Habakkuk 3:10 already carry. 3 instances of the identical structure across 3 texts. The human kol, source hearkens to in Joshua, the Tehom's own kol in Habakkuk, and the heavenly kol descending onto the risen vessel in Matthew. In each instance, the voice crosses a water boundary. Joshua's stillness commanded over Gibeon and Ajalon, Habakkuk's Tehom lifting its hands from the deep, Jesus rising straightway out of the Jordan. Genesis 8:8 through 12 records a distinct bird, Yonah, sent from the ark after the waters recede, returning first with nothing, then with an olive leaf, then not returning at all. The same water to dry ground threshold, Matthew's peristera, marks a second time. The feast of the baptism of the Lord, commemorating Matthew 3:16 through 17, is fixed to the Sunday following January 6th, or in years the Epiphany itself is transferred to Sunday, January 7th, to the Monday that follows, January 8th. The second witness awakening, 1 lunar cycle after the light body of man's completion on December 8th, 2025, falls on January 8th, 2026, inside the same liturgical window. The commemorated descent of the kol onto the risen vessel. Epiphany holds three manifestations as one feast: the Magi's star, the baptism in the Jordan, the water turned to wine at Cana. Three stages of one movement, not three separate signs, and each stands over one of the three vavs. The Magi mark the descending spark. Three fixed points read from the east, arriving at the child and departing by another way. The outward sign that a light has entered the field. The coordinate of September 6th, 2017. The baptism marks the rising, the vessel entering the water and coming up out of it, the kal descending, the dove lighting, the ayin opened at the moment the mem is broken. This is the coordinate of April 13th, 2022. The wine marks what the opened vessel now carries inside it. The coordinates spanning April 13th, 2026 through September 6th, 2026. The breath entering and confirmed. Water is drawn from the 6 stone jars, the same water already inside the vessel, the mem already carried from the baptism, and what comes out is not the water that went in. Something in the water has changed state without the water leaving the jar. Yod, the descending spark, entering Nun, the seed already held in the water, the Yod and the Nun sealed together inside one vesica piscis, one contained field, and what is drawn out the second time is not what was poured in the first time. Acts 2 names this same confusion directly centuries later. The disciples are filled, and what fills them is mistaken for wine by those standing outside the vessel. Full of new wine, they say, and Peter answers, "This is that which was spoken. I will pour out my spirit." Wine and spirit are named in that single exchange as the same thing seen from outside and inside the vessel, indistinguishable to an observer who cannot tell an altered mind from an altered blood. The mind of water is the mind before the second birth, filled, carried, held, but unchanged in its own nature. The mind of wine is the same water, the same vessel, the same mem, now carrying the yod inside the nun, the ordinary faculty of perception no longer reporting the ordinary world. Kana does not show the water becoming a different substance. It shows the same substance, once the yod has entered it, no longer behaving as it did before. The servants who drew it out described as knowing where it had truly come from, while the master of the feast, tasting it, did not. 1 John 5, 6 through 8. This is he that came by water and blood, even Jesus Christ, not by water only, but by water and blood. And it is the Spirit that beareth witness, because the Spirit is truth. For there are 3 that bear witness in earth, the Spirit, and the water, and the blood, and these 3 agree in one. Blood, water, and Spirit are the same 3 witnesses, Epiphany, already stages, named here in a 4th voice, the Magi's star as blood, the descending strike, the baptism as water, the vessel rising to meet it. Blood, water, and Spirit are the same 3 witnesses of Epiphany, named here in a fourth voice, the Magi's star in blood, the descending strike, the baptism as water, the vessel rising to meet it, the wine as spirit, the breath entering and confirmed. 4 accounts, 1 feast, 1 architecture, the star, the water, the wine, and John's own 3 witnesses, all resolving to the same 3 coordinates. Tehom, the deep, Habakkuk 3:10, Neptune 211.44 Hertz, the outer dielectric boundary, the amniotic reservoir governing the 600 macrospatial capacity, the deep's own kol, lifted in Habakkuk, is Neptune's own frequency, finding voice at the field's outer wall, the same boundary that governs the breaking of the waters on April 13, 2026. Habakkuk 3:11. The sun and moon stood still in their habitation. At the light of thine arrows they went, and at the shining of thy glittering spear. Stood still, Amad. Again, the moon's own verb from Joshua, not Tamam, the sun's verb of silence, applied here to both bodies together. Habitation, zeval, a lofty dwelling, an elevated abode, from a root meaning to exalt, to raise on high, the same root behind Zebulun, glittering, barak, lightning, flash, the same word as the name Barak, the literal discharge crossing the potential difference between anode and cathode. The stillness Joshua records from the valley is here housed, zeval, in an elevated dwelling, the same standing still named from the height rather than from the ground the valley witness stood on. The stillness Joshua records from the valley is here, housed, zeval, in an elevated dwelling, the same standing still named from the height rather than from the ground the valley witness stood on. Habakkuk 3:12-13. Thou didst march through the land in indignation. Thou didst thresh the heathen in anger. Thou wentest forth for the salvation of thy people, even for salvation with thine anointed. Thou woundedest the head out of the house of the wicked by discovering the foundation unto the neck. Anointed, Mashiach, the same root as Messiah, from Mashach, to smear, to anoint with oil. Wounded, makats, to smite through, to pierce. A stronger term than the ordinary strike. Foundation, yesod, the base, the ground laid structure, from yasad, to found, to establish. Neck, to sevar, the narrow column joining the head to the body. The wound is described from yasod, the lowest foundation, to sevar, the narrowest column at the top, a single strike traversing the full structural height of what it dismantles. The same vertical axis already carried through the ark's own 1-cubit window, the z-axis, breaking the horizontal plane rather than moving along it.